What does it take to make workshops work? And how can we facilitate collaboration that sticks and leads to results? My name is Miriam Hackness, and with the Workshops Work podcast, I'm on the mission to find the magic ingredients that make workshops work. Today with me on the show is Sharon Leigh, and in our almost 2 hours long conversation, we cover a lot of ground. First, we speak about the inner game and what it takes to facilitate, to host those who usually host others, especially when we are in the neurodiverse spectrum. In the second part of the conversation, we dive deep into group work and what it means to facilitate conversations and to facilitate those who usually facilitate. So stay tuned. Sharon,
okay.
Welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm delighted to be here.
Yes, and we just started warming up and I cut you off and said, okay, let's start recording. So you were just sharing about one of the million books you had in mind that you would like to write and titled COVID Conversations, not about COVID, but about ...
Okay. Yes. Thanks for the lead in. It's about what the opportunities through conversations and meeting people that COVID has given us, not just me, because I notice it in the people that I'm speaking with, and the amount of, I want to say free time, not free time, but people have been more open and have taken more time and made more time to have conversations like these. And I've just had the most amazing, inspiring conversations with people from all over the world. And that's what really interests me. And so I thought, wow, I should just do a book about that. And because there's a lot of things that are connected, and after a year and a half, I can see, the threads of connectivity in the people that I've kind of have in my orbit. And some people I talk to repetitively, there's a few people I talk to once a week, a small group. Other people it's once a month or every couple months. And then but I leave enough space for new conversations and new people, like yesterday morning. And it was just, I just get so much energy and inspiration off that. And so what I recognized is that I've started using Otter, the voice to text. And then sometimes if I'm running the Zoom, then I record it. And then, so recording it in a couple different ways. But for a year and a half of having conversations like this, it's like, that's done. Now, granted, I need to hire an intern to do all the work of pulling it together. The editing part I actually like, believe it or not. The other people are like, oh, just kill me. I'm not editing. That part I actually like. So
it can be very meditative and reflective. Yeah. I remember I edited the first 26 episodes of the podcast.
Editing? No. Video editing? No.
Video editing, I do a little bit of video. So the videos that I post, I edit them. And can be fun, but it's tedious. Podcast editing is more fun, but it takes time, yeah.
Yeah. No, I prefer the writing editing. Video editing, definitely not my thing. Yeah, I could totally outsource that and not have 1 ounce of guilt or shame over that. That is not I found that out very quickly. I think because it's a repetitive, tasky thing, which I'm not good at. I do not prefer it. Yeah.
Which leads us almost to a word you have mentioned in our earlier conversation of a wordsmith, that you would consider yourself a wordsmith. So I'm not surprised that you enjoy the editorial part of the writing and pulling it together.
Yeah. And I can fall down the rabbit hole of that for sure.
And before getting there, I just wanted to reflect on what you were saying about these COVID conversations, because I hear you and I made a similar observation. And I wonder where it actually comes from. You said we started to make time instead of take time. So it's almost like this conscious decision of being present with each other suddenly.
Exactly.
And I had the impression that especially in the early pandemic times, suddenly the question of how are you had this extra moment of pause.
Exactly.
And created the opportunity to actually really listen and feel compassion with each other that we didn't have before.
Right.
Is this something that we can keep? How can we nurture that? Because I have the impression that in 2021 was really almost marked by uncertainty and stress. And now 2022 is, okay, that's our new normal. We know that we can survive in uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
And I think now the risk of just going back into our pre-COVID behaviors is very high.
For some people, yes. For others of us, we're never going back. And we'd we'd fight tooth and nail to keep from doing that. And it comes from a sector of people who have been, I don't want to say marginalized. Some of us, yes, absolutely. But being neurodivergent, we've had to fit into a neuronormative world. And COVID has been like, oh, hey, wait a minute. This is our playing field. Mm-hmm. And this is great. So there's a number of us who introverts being one, because the world is built for the extroverts, everything, pretty much. And so this is a new way to look at it, a new way of doing things that you can't, it's like, once you open the can of worms, you can't get everything back in it. And we don't want to go back in the box. So it's like, okay, what do we do with this now? And so there's this, it's like the Wild West of reconfiguring everything. And so there's a lot of us who have a voice now and the creativity, and there's so much conversation going on. But, the unhurried conversations, what you're doing, it's perfect for the world. It's what the world needs right now.
And when you say we, I hear that you're referring to neurodivergent people.
Mm-hmm. But also creatives.
And you said that this pandemic and this working from home, it's been your time. What do you mean by that concretely? And how can we benefit? How can we?
It's when I mean my time, I don't mean my time in my, in my house. I mean, it's like the way that, like industrialized education has gone. Mm-hmm. I personally created my education trajectory, and everybody was saying, you can't do that. And I was like, well, I don't care what you think, if I can or can't do something. This is what I'm doing. And I'm fully aware of what people have thought of me and what they think of me. And it's like, you can't do that. It's just the construct of society, and I know what it means to live outside of that. Mm-hmm. And, to always have been coloring outside the lines. And now it's like the other people that are like me, we're not stressed by the COVID thing because we've always been in this living in the gray areas and in the flux. Mm. And so the people who have had, because security is an illusion. Now, the people who are, neuromarginalized, okay, we know that because we've lived it our whole entire lives. And I'm 60. So that's a long time to have built the muscles to be flexible and resilient. And so I do a lot of coaching of people who are like, I want to say neuronormatives, who are like, what the hell's going on? Well, how can I get it back? And I'm like, do you want it back? Why do you? So working with people to come to an awareness and a certain level of comfort that type of security is an illusion and has been. And so it's like, okay, what will make you feel secure? How can you build your own recipe for this? And so this is what the pandemic has just torn the lid off of, is that illusion of, because I've always talked about the diversity, not with, yes, with people and things, but it's always been known it's smart to diversify your finances and investments. It's also important to diversify skills. And that book Range, that came out, was published not so long ago. And so it's like, it's risky to be very narrow in this day and age. Before, not so risky. It was kind of the thing to do. I hear my father's voice, it's like, get a job in the government, you'll be safe. And I'm just like, 9 to 5 every day, same thing. It's like, but but his thing was, it's safe.
Yeah.
And it's been proven now a number of times, not safe. It's a phasal thing. So for me, having a number of skills so I can move and pivot has always been super important. Yeah. Sorry, I'm like,
no, it's great. It's great. I enjoy that. I'm here to believe that.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's one thing you could share that everyone who's still kind of impacted of this uncertainty and insecurity might be able to learn from how a neurodivergent person has learned to cope with life in general.
Yeah, I've been asked this a lot definitely in the last 6 months, in the last like 3 months, very much so, because it's the end of the year and people start to want to tie things up because it's the end of the year. And then they get into January where they have these goals and, they're setting the New Year's resolutions. And I'm like, just take a nap. And, but the rest and self-reflection, but I know people don't want to hear this. And before, I never would have spoken about it. But now I can start speaking about things because people have had like it's like what I call the great pause. People talk about the great resignation.
Great pause, I love it.
And the COVID is like the great pause. And everybody has to like reflect and look at themselves for the first time like ever, because the last pandemic 100 years ago, the world was different. And so now this time it's very specific. It's very historic and fascinating because of the bandwidth and the go, this thing that we've been ramping up to, and then just have it like hit a wall and just drop off. Now, granted, the people who are, healthcare workers, they haven't had a pause, but they are looking at things differently because you can hear them speaking about it. But it's like, what matters now? And so this is what, and again, I saw it. What did the words say? I thought I was like, oh, that's it. It's not that you can't find good people to work. It's that people now have their eyes open and are not willing to put up with being treated badly.
Yeah.
Where when everything was go, 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 and there was no pause, people didn't have time to reflect about whether they liked something or not, or whether it was the right fit or not. And so I can now use the COVID experience that we're all experienced in saying, okay, well, how do you feel? What do you want? Whereas before when I'd ask that, they'd go, but, and they just weren't even slowing down in a coaching situation. It was very difficult. Yes. To get that door open.
And I love how you put the but in there, which makes me think of it's through the working from home experience and the pandemic that we kind of entered the yes and maybe period where we can see the alternative.
Yes.
The counterfactual is just in front of our eyes, right? So we could be rushing to work and we can be with our family.
Yes.
So suddenly, I think every shitty meeting became so much more costly in terms of energy because we are aware of the alternative, which is just 1 meter away and which is called couch and family.
Yeah.
And nap.
Yeah. And people still, I was caught between right when the pandemic started, and I recognized the opportunity of what we were heading into, even right at the beginning, because my mother would talk about, hanging out in the big nothing, and that you have to sit, it's like seasonal, and you have to sit in fallow, like fields that you let grow over in order to get back the nutrients to then grow again. And, we're the same way, but we've been depleting. And I've known this because of what I've known from her and growing up in her household and watching it get tighter and, optimized but everybody's depleted. And where do you go from there? And it's a losing game. And so that's when it's more yes, but. That gets louder and louder and louder. But now that we've had the great pause, and I was afraid in the beginning that there wouldn't be enough cycles of the COVID. And I don't wish that on anybody. I always have to, preload that with saying it's horrible and people are suffering financially, physically, losing, loved ones. So, but as the human race, we damn well need it.
And yes, so
yeah, it's a catalyst. It's a catalyst in our human evolution to get to the next step in the awareness.
And I find it fascinating. I had similar thoughts at the beginning of the pandemic where I was secretly hoping, and same as you, seeing all the, not downplaying the misery that it caused, but seeing the opportunity that if it takes long enough, we don't have, or toxic cultures don't have a chance to survive, because
you can't hang on to that.
Exactly. You cannot micromanage if everyone works from home, and you cannot shout at people because they will just turn the camera and the Wi-Fi off and shut the computer down.
And the deeper than that is like, we can't hang on, that's with other people, but even in ourselves, people can't hang on to the I should, I must. It's very difficult to hang on to that people still do, which is, the coaching.
That's true.
They're trying to give us support for that, but it's the people that want to go back to that. But it's like, how about you try something different?
Yes. And this, I think, brings us to the topic of actually facilitation, because I think as facilitators and coaches, we've been trained ourselves to sit with ourselves and to cope with all these inner voices and to lean in this discomfort. For someone who hasn't experienced that or who is not used to it, suddenly being isolated with themselves it can be painful, leads to depression, leads to all sorts of toxic, self-destructive behavior. So how can we, with our superpower of facilitation or leading conversations or connecting people, actually reach out to those or include those who struggle more with being with themselves?
I think about this a lot, and I finally came to a place where, for me personally, the best thing I can do is be in support of the people who are better at that than I am. For example, I know some people that work in the trauma fields. I am not good at that. And so, because I thought, gosh, the people, when I was having people in my workshops, and I was thinking, I know that there are people in this room who are really going through a hard time. And I sort of was afraid of that. So I talked to my friends who work with trauma and say, okay, if this happens, what do I do about it? Because that is not my field. But I'm very sensitive to that and aware of it. And so I got a lot of tips and tools. But then I, again, through discussion and thinking about it, I thought, okay, I don't want to work, in areas, I'm going to say on the ground floor of the awareness. I don't know, awareness ladder. I hate to, because that puts it in a judgment factor. So I try and choose metaphors that has the judgment out of it. But I ended up in this area where I can do better work and more support for everybody if I'm helping other coaches, facilitators, and trainers. This is kind of where I've come to settle. Because in the beginning, I thought, okay, I could do this with these groups and help everybody. And I'm like, I'm not the best at that with the people who don't have the languaging and the experience. And so I can help the other people who are kind of, reaching burnout or they're, help keeping them healthy, other coaches and trainers and educators. And so this has become my sweet spot.
Holding the space for those who hold the space.
Exactly. And making sure everybody is healthy and balanced and energized. And I don't mean energized like, cheerleader energized. There's a core energy. And help these people figure out, okay, what does that sustainable energy producing, what does that machine look like? What does that generator look like? And helping people figure that out and kind of set up their own. I know self-care is people just that rolls off the tongue and out the window. We say self-care, but it's true. But what does the self-care system look like? What do people have in place to regenerate? And so that's what I do.
How do you facilitate self-care?
For others or me?
Oh, is it different?
Oh, of course. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm before, again, was it BP before pandemic? BC? It's in BC. Yeah, chapter 35 BC. Yeah, the other BC. It's one of these things that I've hesitated to share because before the pandemic, people would say, and in the beginning of the pandemic, people would say, yeah, but you're fanatical, which I'm not by any stretch of the imagination. But when the pandemic happened, I knew that, okay, I'm going to have to back it off. I'm going to have to back off a lot of things. And we moved back to France. It was like, we were here 2 months and then the pandemic hit. So it's like, it gutted us financially. And all my plans for the leadership retreats, the in-place leadership retreats, all of it was gutted. And so I knew instantly, it's like, okay, this is going to take a lot of work and I have to be very careful. First thing that enters my head is, how am I going to take care of myself? Number one. And how am I going to take care of my wife? Because she suffers heavily from the self-saboteurs. And so I was like, okay, this is going to be a marathon and I have to pay attention. I have to be steady and consistent in the self-care category, which means nutrition and sleep and physical activity. Not a lot. I do minimum. I'm on the treadmill every morning for an hour. It's the minimum I can do. Some days I'll miss a day or here and there, but I am on it because I do it like my life depends on it. Mm. And it's not like a la la la, I'm having fun. Now it is I pair it. So that's my podcast hour. And I don't want to talk to anybody. I want to listen to Brene Brown, and I want to listen to, and so that's my the selfish podcast time, but it's I have to do that. Plus with the neurodiversity issues that I have, it's like doing the physical activity then sets me up for the day. But the nutrition is hugely important. So I don't waver on that, and sleep. And that's no joke. And that's the basis. Now, in other parts of my life, I'll add in more. But during the COVID thing, it's like, that's it. That's the basic thing. And I make sure that, we eat right and we sleep and there's resting. There's, in certain phases, there's more napping on some days than other. Yeah. You do what you have to do. Some days I can't work. Some days it's intense when I have to deal with, my nuclear in the household, then I can't work because I'm in support of people. And I can do that. Can do that. So I have to do it. So I do it. And anybody who's in a family, who's their kind of emotional support system in a family like that, they understand what I'm talking about, and it's a marathon going through this whole thing. Yeah.
Hey, since you are listening to this podcast, I was wondering whether you get enough opportunities to exchange, practice, and experiment with other facilitators. Have you heard of the Never Done Before Facilitation Festival? It's a 24-hour global event that is co-created by its participants and delivered by some of the most popular Workshops Work podcast guests. Visit neverdonebefore.org for more information. Use the code WorkshopsWork to get a 20% discount. The festival starts as soon as you join. Now, back to the show.
And one question that just comes to my mind, and I think you're the perfect person to answer that, is how good are we actually as coaches and facilitators to be in service of our loved ones and ourselves? And the reason why I'm asking is that very often we say that we're the worst in eating our own medicine and the shoemaker wears the worst shoes. Mm-hmm. And what I observe very often is when facilitators or coaches put down their hat of being a facilitator, we are the first who run into unsolicited advice. And let me tell you something.
Well, yeah, and it's hard to keep that focus, in your relationships and in your family. I'm lucky in that that's not such a big struggle for me, but I laugh at myself. This is the thing. It's humor. The humor part of it, because as I'm doing it, I'm aware of it, and I'm like, God, I'm such a victim of myself and my personality, but all you need to do, you need to be able to apologize readily and move forward, don't take ourselves too seriously. But I also, because the thing that I go to is like, I am tired of being the adult in the room. And I don't really say it out loud to somebody, but in my head, I'm like, and then I have a couple of people. I have a good support system. That's another thing that's super important. And my mother and I used to say to each other, we would say, I need to call the wham-ambulance. So it's like, I would call her sometimes, or she would call me and just not even say hello, it'd just be like, wham. And I'd be like, oh, you need to talk. And, they're always like, do you have time? Yes. And so it's like, that is just like this, 5 minutes of like bitching about something. And then you can have a regular conversation because you need to get that shit out of your system. Mm. So it's super important, especially during the pandemic when stuff just builds up and, it's like a pressure cooker. You have to have the people around you. And this is one thing that my wife wasn't doing. And she was like, it's in her family culture. It's kind of in the country culture, very much so in the French culture. It's like, you deal with your own shit. You don't tell, you don't include anybody. They're not big on therapy either. So talking to an outsider about your problems, it's really taboo. And so I could tell she wasn't talking to anybody. And I'm like, you need, I said, you're forcing me to be your therapist. And I said, and that's not fair. So you need to talk to your brother. You need to, but she would isolate. And this is what, was scaring me during the pandemic. Because I'm like, I can't fix this. But the thing of just trying to be aware, doing the best we can, laughing at ourselves that we're not going to be able to do it and we're not doing it in a particular moment, then just get yourself back up, dust yourself off and keep going.
Hey.
And take a nap.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think it's even important to be aware of that, to then apply it to those around us.
Yes.
Because if we need this moment to just ramp, how about those we're talking to?
Oh, absolutely.
And maybe in a one-on-one context, they might not feel permission to do that. So we might invite them. Or if we're working with groups, just saying, okay, you might be in this state now. Mm-hmm. Take 5 minutes and just ramp and get it off your chest. Without judgment, because now is the place to be.
Yeah. I learned something from Lily Higgins, and she does
she does that.
The Symphony of Misery or something. I'm like, what? You do what? I was like, oh my God, that's so great. And I recognized it as the permission to vent, the permission to press the button on the pressure cooker and let it out. Because if you don't let that out, then it's going to come into your workshops. People bring it in and they're sitting on it. And so they can't access themselves. They can't access each other. It's super important normally. And I learned this from my mother, but it's, and I see it in the pandemic. It's like so vital to create that venting space, people can wah, and because we need to, and because this shit is frustrating. And so it's like, you have to let, your inner child just kind of like, thrash around a little bit, which is very difficult for people who are see themselves as professional and under control. And, and so you have to create the space to kind of allow that to happen. Yeah.
Yes. I had to write that down. I think it would be a perfect never done before workshop on how to create these moments for venting. Because as you said,
let's do it.
Yes, right?
Oh, hell yes.
Hell yeah. Because I think, as you said before, is sometimes I'm tired of being the only adult in the room, holding the space all the time. And then how do we create actually, these moments to let some steam out in a playful way and to take away this pressure of needing to fix it.
Yes.
And I think very often, especially in relationships, if one just feels the need to vent, the other one gets into this, oh, let me help you. Let's try to fix that. I think men have a very big tendency to do that. I have. So as soon as someone tells me about their problems, I feel the obligation and responsibility to fix it, instead of just saying, it's okay, just vent. And I feel with you.
But it's something I noticed during the pandemic because it was so intense and a lot of them together, because I'm the same way. I'm a problem solver. But again, if you spend time around me, you're forced to hear a lot about my mother. But I'm actually doing a podcast on Monday with the podcast that I do with this guy, Alex. And so we're actually diving into the story of my mother and that whole thing, which is the first time I've ever done that. Anyway, that's the thing. So I'm very excited about that. But there's this thing of asking permission, so I'm used to saying, okay, is this something you're venting or do you need a problem solved? Right at the outset. And what was difficult in my relationship here, I would ask that and she would say, no, I need this solved to something. I was like, okay, then let's do that. When in fact, a half an hour later, or an agonizingly long 15 minutes later, I realized she just wants to vent.
Mm.
But I'm in this gear of problem solving, and I'm like, well, but I asked you, so it's like, the arguments that, that come out of that. But that's the thing. And I recognize that. And I was like, okay, this is interesting because people think they want a problem solved and they actually want to vent. And how the hell do we recognize that?
Mm.
So I notice I always use my situation because it's we're very, very opposite personality types. And so it's, the lab of learning, the laboratory of learning in my house. And we're very true to our types. And so it's, I'm very logical. And while she's an engineer, she's very much on the feeling side.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this, because I'm thinking, what? But it's logical. And I could tell, I do that thing where it's like, I get totally into the logic problem solving mode. I'm like, well, we can solve this. This is easy. Either take a nap, eat something, or to me, bottom line is it's like, what's the primal thing that we can do, to help ourselves to get farther and moving along, physically and as a human animal, like, what do you need?
Mm-hmm.
What do you need? But but when the logic is kicking in, you pair that caring thing with the logic. I can be pretty brutal. It's like, I can feel my hand on my hip and my finger, comes out. Like, what needs to be done? Why don't you take a nap? And
all they need is just a hug and I hear you and it's okay.
Yeah. And then I look at her, I'm like, shit, she needs a hug. Like, and I'm like, but I asked her. Like, what do you? But it's super, super important. That was like, and I'm still learning that. I still get caught. And I'm like, but I asked you, and so but that's part of the thing of being the adult in the room. It's like, if I ask you and you tell me, okay, that's what I'm going to go on. I can't be a mind reader because she was like, you should have known. I'm like, do not ask me to be a medium.
Yeah.
Don't force me to be your therapist. Don't ask me this kind of thing. But it's like I learned so much about myself and human behavior in our little, relationship laboratory during COVID. It's been quite the education.
Yeah.
Because it intensifies, it turns up the volume and almost makes it very graphic.
It's definitely a amplifier of everything that's going on.
Yeah. So it's useful. I take what I've learned and I help other people, and we get healthier. We've gotten healthier. Yeah.
Yeah.
With the communication thing, but people can't. I just can't. I can't force her to communicate.
No, we can invite.
Yeah. Yeah.
We can create the space and make the space and time.
And I know that with other people, but when you're asking me what's the difference in private life and other people, I find, other people easier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. and the clients in the workshops, it's easier.
Yeah. And I think part of it is because what you mentioned earlier, you should have known, me, that with other people, we don't expect them to understand, to know us, to feel the difference and to be empathetic. So we are much clearer in our communication and what we want and expect. And on the other hand, we're also more forgiving. We're more forgiving if someone doesn't understand our needs, because we don't expect them to read our minds. But somehow our family and loved ones, we do expect.
Well, there's a lot of things you can accuse me of, okay? Not enough communication is not one of those things. And so, I don't expect people to read my mind. I will tell you and be very clear about it, and very specific. So I don't expect her to read my mind, which is why I do have a fairly low tolerance on the other side of that. And I know everybody's not built like me, but when I'm fatigued, and I know when I'm fatigued, and that's when I lose my patience, the patience needle on the meter drops, and I'm just like, why would you do that?
It's so funny with my relationship broke over COVID, but we tried everything to workshop our relationship. So at one point we had
just the phrase. Okay.
We had the slider on the apartment door, and we had buckets. So the bucket is empty. This means I can take on all of your stuff. Tell me all your stories. Or is the bucket full? And the bucket full means, okay, I just don't have capacity. I'm full. If you tell me anything, I don't have headspace to listen to you.
Right.
And combined with that, there was a weather kind of sign. Am I sunny? So am I in a good mood?
Right.
Or am I cloudy? So if the bucket is full and I'm cloudy, then this is how I react. Then I just want a hug. I just want you to listen. Don't give me advice. So it was kind of almost like how do you call this for your washing machine? Instructions for your washing machine. It was instructions.
Yeah.
And this was actually
an alert system, and a visual alert system, which can be really handy.
Yeah. At the end, if you ignore it, the relationship will break.
We got one right outside this door because we've got 3 people in this household, and neither of them share what they're thinking or feeling. And I said, okay, how about we do with these magnets on it? And so they're different grades of kind of weatherish. Yeah. So where are you at any given day? Because I can't tell with you guys,
And then if you know how they would react in the different situations, then it helps you to, because I learned at some point, that while if my bucket is full and I'm cloudy, I need a hug and I don't need advice. For him, he needs him time and he doesn't want me around. So we would clash if we're in the same state of mind. We'd totally clash because I want a hug and he wants to push me away.
Right. No, I get you. And so I've made it part of the thing that I integrated was, and it feels kind of mechanical, but I mean, Lydia and I have been together for 25 years this December. And so it's like, okay, I can do this. What I need to do for her is make sure she gets like a hug quota in a day, but we're really independent. So this is why it's hard to tell, and she would never ask. So it's like, okay, I'm not going to wait till she asks. I'm not going to wait till she's depleted. I'm going to fill the hug quota. And, and that thing of like, you could feel somebody's just go, there's a thing about that, right? And so when I was reading about that and being kind of on the autism side, I have to do things more in a mechanical way. I know that this is needed. I can do that. I will do that. And so I got into like hugging her like 4 or 5 times a day. Just
for
this
20 seconds or longer.
10 seconds long. Man, that shit works.
Yes.
That shit works. I'm like, okay, cool. I could do this, and yeah, so I make the effort to give her, like, raise her little endorphin level, or which it's not the endorphin level, the oxytocin level.
Oxytocin, yeah.
Yeah. So I chemically, like, boost her, it's like getting a booster oxytocin booster shot.
It's a nicer booster.
But I mean, and I do tend to look things kind of in the scientific way like that, in a chemical, it's like, oh, what can I do for you? It's like, okay, isn't it time for a booster hug? And
I think most of the ways how we interact with ourselves and our surrounding are kind of mechanical and scientific. And as you mentioned before, you ask her, do you want to vent or do you want advice or a solution? And she would say solution. And maybe it's both. Maybe first it's this kind of feeling of being heard and secure and safe.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can think of solutions, because we first need to calm down our animal brain. If we're stressed and we're anxious, first need to feel safe. And we first need the hug and the...
Because she's always like her, which is a lot of people. And I mean, I have permission, just to let you know, I have permission to use her as an example, because it is, I do talk a lot about her, and because it's fascinating, and using it. People say, well, do you have an example? I was like, yes, I do. Very concrete examples, but I have her permission. So the things that I do have permission about, I use. But we work on it. It's work, and it's like the thing of like, okay. Now, of course, being scientifically minded, I'll be like, what's the minimum amount of input to have the maximum benefit? I can't help it. It's how I'm wired. And so I do have to be very, very careful on, I'm aware of it. Yeah.
And how would you create this minimum input, maximum output with someone whom you cannot hug? So what would be for you the equivalent of a hug when you're, for instance, working with a client through the screen?
It's actually, that's easier for me. That's what I was saying. It's easier for me because it's the creating a safe space, and it's the interest. Definitely screen is actually easier than in person, because I could tell in person people want a hug, and I'm like, I can't, because my personal space, I mean, I'm like, I can, hug and be affectionate with Lydia, but like nobody else. And it's like that with a lot of people on the spectrum. I have my one person. So I'm not a hugger, and getting used to France where you have to touch people's faces to kiss them. COVID was like such a godsend for me. I'm like, whoop, we need distance. Like, hallelujah. So I don't know what I'm going to do when it goes back. I'm just like, whoop, fist bump. Yes. But yeah, online, that is like so easy for me. It's easy because I can maintain the eye contact. I can create a very, very safe, inclusive space. And that has also proven out during the pandemic with the workshops and the coaching that I've done. That people say, that's hard. I'm like, actually, I love it. It's easy. And people respond really well to it. But it's showing people that they're seen and heard.
How do you do that?
I pay attention to what they say. And so I bring it up. I bring little things up. And it's what I've always done in physically as well, face to face with people as well. I notice stuff. And people notice that I notice stuff. So they feel seen. It's just little, it's slight. And I can notice, because I can not hyper focus, but I focus in on them. So I notice when their eyes light up when they're talking about something. I'm like, ooh, I know that you like that because, and I notice, just notice things about people. And then if I talk to them long enough, then I start noticing a pattern, and I'm like, okay, they like that. And then it's like, okay, for you, for example, I know that you like having these open conversations, and that you're inspired by, the ideas and concepts of things, because I could see your eyes light up about them. And that it almost feels to me like cheating in a way, but I've always noticed these things about people. I've always noticed what brings people joy. And so that conveys online the same thing. So if I spend any time talking to somebody, it's very easy for me to see somebody's little inner animal. Yeah. And when people feel seen, there's trust.
Yeah.
Yeah. And unjudgment. I'm completely non-judgmental, both with myself. And again, this is a thing. When people are very punishing to themselves, that conveys, because people think, God, if they're that punishing with themselves, it's unspoken. And so they feel that you're going to put that judgment onto other people as well. And since I don't really have that, I don't struggle with that, they feel it. Again, it's not a said thing. It's they feel that they're unjudged as well. Yeah.
And I wonder whether this comes from our natural instinct to project. Absolutely. We're constantly projecting our own stuff on other people. So if we judge ourselves, we do judge others by definition, because we're just a reflection of our own fears, our own insecurities.
Absolutely. 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 And so, and for me, I how I operate, I'm I give myself a wide breadth of permission to do stupid shit, and I laugh at it and I'm like, okay, I'll try.
Here we go again.
But there's no punishment in it. And so, that's when Lydia and I first got together, her upbringing, but her family culture and the country culture. And she would say to me, well, somebody's got to pay. And I was like, nobody, it's just, okay, you just go on, you move forward. And I said, nobody needs to be punished. And she was like, somebody needs to be punished. And I was like, whoa, like, we're going to have to talk about that, because like nobody needs to be punished as an adult. Like,
how do you change such a mindset? Because it's a very moral belief in a belief.
Not moral, it's judging.
Yeah. True.
People wrap it in the cloak of moral, but it's judgment.
How do you change such a mindset? Because you cannot convince someone with words.
No.
It's not the one of those things.
No. It's part of what I call cat psychology. And this is another way that just what I do, because you can't make Kitty, dogs, yes, dogs will be like, oh, love me. Cats are like, meh. And so you can't force a cat to love you. The cat you have to do it by behavior, and you have to be cool enough and inviting enough, or, provoke their curiosity enough that they come to you and then want to stay and sit on your lap. And so humans are the same way, because we're all animals. And I keep saying, everything I do, it's like, strip it back. What does this look like in its most primal form? And the non-judgment stuff is because kids aren't judgmental. And so our primal form of curiosity is so wide open and non-judgmental. So I'm always curious of like, okay, how can I get us back here? So it looks like a series of questions, and which changes depending on the person. It's emergent. It's hard to describe. It changes from person to person to situation. So as a coach or something, it just takes observation and a kind of awareness, and just a letting things be. But so I don't try and change anybody. I don't try and change that thing. You have to meet them where they are. And the only thing you can really do is live by example. And either they're in a stage to recognize it or not. And I know that sounds very hands-off and like, well, you're not actually doing anything. And I'm like, well,
what can you do?
What can you do? If somebody's not ready and they can't recognize that, there's really not much you can do, So in a situation before with her, it's like, somebody needs to be punished. She knows it now. She knows that she has a propensity to go there and be like, somebody. And I'm just like, nobody needs to be punished. We'll do better next time. And there's, just calmly, and then more and more, but when under stress and duration, and when she's hungry and tired, bang, she goes right back to the culture.
We all do.
This is my point. Okay. So I also talk about baselines. And so where's the baseline? Now, people who have grown up with trauma and their childhood was fairly traumatic, her and her brother are sitting like way up on number 8. They're like engines are revving at all times.
What does number 8 mean?
It's very high to being like angry or, they're just always up there. Mine is down like on 1, pretty much at all times. It takes a lot to get me to rise to the, I might blip, but then I come right back down to my baseline. Mm-hmm. Whereas they're sitting up here and it takes a hair trigger to piss them off, where they're just like, they're ranting, and the energy and the endorphins, but that also kicks in a cycle of being addicted to that, being addicted to the anger endorphins. So it's like, I do a lot of talking with clients about how do you lower that baseline? And so that takes, awareness and effort. And it's building the muscles of recognizing and then breathing and then to getting it lower.
Yeah. Reminds me a lot of the work I did during the Vipassana meditation.
Mm-hmm. Meditation is a good way, but if you're in front of somebody who's like, fuck meditation, I'm not meditating. Yeah. You can't make me meditate.
I put them into a Vipassana retreat, 10 days in silence, meditating 10 hours.
Oh, sure, if they'll go.
Yeah.
If you can get them to go.
Yeah.
You're not going to get an engineer to do that.
No.
Well, maybe now, after the great pause, they'll be open to it. But before then, not a chance in hell.
Thank you for staying tuned and listening to the show. I appreciate your attention as I know how busy you are. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and engage by sharing your comments and thoughts, and visit workshops.work to download the one-page summary. I'm looking forward to seeing you back at the next episode, and I wish you a fruitful day.